Play that music.
Ooh.
Oh, you look like you're at a rave.
I'm actually from the future. I'm here to tell you, don't go down that street corner. I'm just saying, like, there's someone with eggs. There's things with eggs.
And I'm a figment from your past, here to remind you to always take that perfect MySpace selfie. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to episode 117 of Restitching the Tapestry. I lost track of where we are. But no, welcome back, everyone. It's been a couple of weeks. Ari and I, we've had a lot of stuff going on. We needed a break for a couple of weeks, but we're back, and I'm going to be fiddling with my hair the whole time. But we're back now, and we are ready to have a chat about some interesting topics. And ultimately, we're just excited to be here. We need to catch up.
Absolutely.
We need to catch up. What have you been doing?
No, we're not starting. We're not starting with me. We're starting with you because you had.
What? Nothing's.
I'm sorry. Go like this. Go like this.
Oh.
Oh.
Yes, a couple of weekends ago, I got engaged, which was still, like, I was telling somebody yesterday that it feels like it's been both 1,000 years, but also 5 seconds since that happened. And it just feels very surreal. But it feels
happy
good
for you. I just think about it every so often, and I just get so happy for you that you just like, my bestie found the one.
Oh, thank you. Well, and you've been there with me since the beginning. You have seen every chapter of the dating woes. You remember lonely college Donny, who was just very emo about everything.
I knew that you were going to end up with him because when I came to visit, you sat through a whole series with his favorite show, the Minotaur World show.
Oh my God.
And you did not complain at all. And I knew that you were not a fan. I knew that you were not a fan.
I know. I was just like.
But you sat through that whole show and you were like, baby, that's great. I love that show. It's great.
I can't, like, was that imposed on YouTube? Were you?
No, I loved it. I loved every single minute of it.
Would it surprise you that I actually like it now that I've watched the whole thing?
Absolutely, because that grows on you just like your partner.
Well, yeah, because at first I was like, this is asinine. Like, what is happening? But then I was like, wait, I like Pokemon. Like, Donny, get over yourself.
No, it's absolutely because he loved it, he shared it with you, and then now you love it.
Oh, I do. That is a good point. That is very wholesome. But no, like it went well. If you're watching and you haven't watched my recap video, that video elaborates on what happened a little bit more succinctly than how I'm explaining it right now. But no, like I've been keeping it a secret for about a couple of months, and then I think I told you a few days, or like maybe like the day of, but before, because
you told me the day of, and I was just like, oh, it's finally happening.
It's been physically painful for me to keep that a secret because Britt's one of those people. It takes moving a mountain to surprise him because he's so inquisitive and immediately knows when something's going on. So I literally probably only told like one person who had to help me plan the trip to Traverse City. But like I was just like, okay, before it happens, I need to at least tell a couple of people. about it and be like, hey, this is about to go down. But like it was very climactic. And somehow worked out. Like I was able to surprise Britt entirely. I did not think I would be able to surprise him, but he was completely mind blown. He was shaking, kind of like almost crying, and I was poised somehow. I don't like I was like an island in the middle of a hurricane's eye.
You did so good.
Thank you. Thank you. Because you know me, I'm dramatic 90% of the time. I will probably, had I not had a therapy appointment earlier in the week, a couple of days before, I probably would have been like,
Weepy.
twitching.
That's all
Yeah.
right. You did so
Right.
good. You did so good. It worked out
Thank
so
you.
well. I'm so proud of you.
Oh, thank you. And beyond that, I've been finishing up the semester. That's all done and over with. We bought a lot of gardening stuff. We've been working on gardening. We built a greenhouse. I don't think I've sent you pictures of it yet, have I?
No, how's your little tree doing?
It's doing phenomenally. It's grown probably like a couple of centimeters since you've seen it last. Like I have quite a few videos that I have backlogged that I need to upload. Like I think I have like at least 2 gardening videos, a house update video.
I have a couple grocery videos and a kombucha video to upload. I have a grocery video that I'm dressed in cosplay that I need to upload. That's so hilarious.
I I am ready. I am ready for this. I was born ready to see this video. Ari, what have you been doing? How have you been? How are things going?
It's been interesting. I was struggling for a bit, but I'm doing all right now. It's been a little bit back and forth, but I just keep moving, keep doing my thing. Uh, I had a classmate shirk on the group work. We did a group work.
Oh, in a master's program too, nonetheless.
I know it was.
What?
At least it wasn't the type of group project where I had to lean on them heavily. It was sort of like a group project where all of the roles were clearly delineated and like deviated. So it was sort of like I had my part of the group project, they had their part of the group project, and it was sort of like there was only like a little bit of crossover that they had to like their part of what they had to do was comment on my excerpt for my proposal.
Mhm.
So like I had to write a paper, and so I had to write an excerpt for my paper and post it to this discussion board for my group. And she was supposed to comment on it and do something transformative for it to participate in the group work, and she did not do anything like that.
Oh,
But
okay,
I did.
very
I
good.
did for her, and I actually did a bunch of research for her, and I actually did I found like sources for her so she could spend all weekend working on her paper, and she actually had most of her source material that she would need for her paper to help like flesh out her ideas.
Wow.
So I probably did like half her research that she would like half to like 3/4 of her research that she would need for her paper.
Mm.
But she didn't help me out at all. So like I'm
What?
hoping I'm
Mm.
hoping that it kind of reflects on her grade, but like I'm not like asking bad for her, but like it's just like when you don't do the group work, like it should reflect on your grade.
Well, as a professor, Phoebe, will you stop it? No, like as a professor, like no, that's glaring. Like that's not acceptable. That's not acceptable. And hopefully your professor has that in there in the assignment, like where they look at participation and engagement, because that's
It was just
important.
it was just kind of upsetting to me because it's just like I did all of this stuff for her, and it was just sort of like I wasn't asking her to do as much as I did, but like at least something would have been nice. Like at
Mm.
least at least some kind of like, you know, trans at least some kind of like comment on my post, just like some kind of like comment.
Acknowledgement.
Well, she commented on her post and said yours is really good, and like that's all she posted, and then didn't post anything on mine about like analyzing my excerpt or like doing anything about it like at all. And like So it's just it's sort of like not it's just the laziness, you know, and
Yeah.
just it just
That
upset
happens
me.
that happens a lot, unfortunately.
But not in grad school, you know, like
Yeah, you would think in grad school it'd be completely different and everybody would be super engaged, right?
right.
Ideally. Oh, checking out the comments here. Arby was here earlier. Hello, Arby. And then Shayna, my friend Shayna was here.
Hello.
It's great to see you.
I heard recently that Axel was going to stop using TikTok because TikTok was very dangerous as a place.
That's true. So, would you prefer addressing you as Axel now as opposed to the name I mentioned earlier? Please, if you were listening, let me know, because if so, I do apologize for that. Um, but hopefully they're still here. Well, do we want to do the show mission statement? Whose turn is it?
I think it's my turn. I'm gonna, yeah, scrolling up,
Let's do
going back
it.
up to the mission statement.
Let's do that mission statement.
Here we go. You ready?
I'm
Should I
ready.
do the? Should I? Does this look like Back to the Future when I have it up
While
like
you're
this?
doing that, I'm going to be gay emo and I'm going to ruminate about it
Okay, here we go. And I think
with
I can
praying
see it if I do
hands.
like this. We live in a dynamic society where social media shapes us by creating greater opportunities for connection. It has led to a developing understanding of the adversity many marginalized communities face, the powers causing the adversity, and those who act as bystanders as atrocities take place in real time. Our goal with this show is to make connections and have challenging conversations about social topics, current events, pop culture, and art. Together, let's weave the threads of understanding with what privilege we have in order to learn, educate, and create in a world that's growing.
I was lip syncing to your performance.
I think that's great. Maybe one day we should just do it together, like at the same time.
Oh my god, that would be trippy. We should totally do that one of these days.
I think we should do that for I think we should do that for episode 200, like where we just do it all together.
That would be great. I love
Yeah,
that. I'd be okay with that for like episode 150 even, because 200 is still a ways away.
that's true.
200 is still like maybe a couple of years away. But we'll
I
get
don't
there.
Yeah, we'll get there.
So, okay, current event snapshot. I'm going to be honest. I've not really been tuned into current events lately, other than like maybe a couple of things. So if there's anything that you can think of that you want to add, feel free. But the two big things that I noted were, one, I think we talked about Santos. Like, is he Representative Santos? Um, and he has been, I think, indicted.
Have you noticed there have been so many more cops out lately in Michigan?
I've noticed that too. I wonder, could it be
Do
that
you
it's
know
getting,
why? Do you know why?
why?
So in Michigan, they just passed a law where they finally made it illegal to use your cell phone at all while you're in your vehicle. So you can't talk on the phone, you can't look up maps, and you can't do anything with your cell phone while you're driving. So what they've been doing is they've been sending, like, the cops have been more active lately as a way to cut down on people being on their cell phones.
Like that incentive. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. No, I did not know that. I did
Yeah.
not know
Because
that.
the first day that it was, the first day that it had passed, I saw like 4 people get pulled over. But like you can't do any like recording in your car, like any of that. Like, so I feel like there are repercussions for this, because like imagine you're driving and like a police officer pulls you over, and so like you want to film the police officer because
Right.
you don't trust the police officer. Like imagine if you're like a black person, or you know, and you don't trust this police officer, you want to film this police officer doing something, whatever.
Yeah.
They could possibly give you a ticket, or they could maybe even arrest you, or have some kind of legal action against you for using your cell phone while you're driving,
That's wild to me.
or having it in your vehicle while you like using it while you're behind the wheel.
What if it's like mounted or something, like on
If
like
you touch your cell phone while you're behind the wheel of your car, you could get in trouble. I just think that there are a lot of repercussions for this, and I don't think that we know all of the legalities of it yet.
yeah, we'll revisit it because I think that that's something that's going to definitely crop up more. Like there's going to be some issues with. I understand they obviously it's to keep people safe, but at the same time, like we have to think about how it impacts a variety of different communities too, who might be more vulnerable in
I
certain
thought about
situations.
honestly, I thought about getting like a dash cam for my car. Because my sister has one. Have you ever thought about getting like a dash cam?
I've considered it, but I've never gotten as far as getting one.
Because like you can record like accidents and stuff like that, and then you have like evidence for like your insurance company and stuff like that. But just like it's good for like recording like police officers and stuff like that if you ever get pulled over, and like you can record like how fast you were going and stuff, and like you have evidence to prove like if you ran a red light or not, and just like it I feel like it's because I just don't trust cops sometimes, and it's just it
Mhm.
just to have evidence of like stuff so you can go back and like show what you did and stuff, so if you ever get pulled into like court and stuff, you have evidence of like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, like you can at least advocate for yourself in some fashion. So the other piece of news that I wanted to note on is Florida again. Florida yet again. Well, so DeSantis has been passing more legislation, and this time passed legislation to make it more difficult for adults in the trans community to gain access to gender affirming care. Now they have to go through some sort of committee process to get like verification, a committee process of people, appointed by him. So obviously, like that presents a lot of just another area of difficulty and accessibility for the trans community.
Do you know who Mercury is? She's a handy woman on TikTok. She just raised over $2 million for gender affirming care, like gender affirming, um, like surgeries and stuff like that. She just raised a whole bunch of money for the trans community.
Oh wow, I think I know who you're talking about, but I didn't see it. Was it on TikTok you said?
Yeah, well, she was across several platforms, but TikTok was the main one.
Oh, yeah,
She's the
that's
trans
so
woman
good.
who always talks about she has a book coming out about like how to fix up your house and like how to be more handy and like fixing things and stuff like that, but she always talks about like how to take care of your house, and she was always teaching like women and like trans people like how to do like fixer up stuff because you know uh but she was raising money for gender affirming care and for trans awareness day just recently.
That's so awesome.
But
I,
I was just thinking about the terrible stuff that was happening in Florida where they're restricting access to
mhm.
all of that, and then I was just thinking about all the good stuff that was happening with Mercury, and I was like, oh.
That's so see, those things are so needed, like right now, especially. So that's wonderful. RP says, "What did I miss? We've been catching up. We were just doing the current event snapshot, and yes, I am wearing my Lincoln Park shirt today, of my 5,000 band tees that I have. So okay, so tonight's topic is one that we've actually wanted to talk about for a long time, and it's trauma bonding. And we've jokingly mentioned trauma bonding before because, like, obviously, we both have similar traumas with regard to public humiliation, etc., that we've connected with. But we wanted to break it down and have a more in-depth conversation about what trauma bonding is, and we wanted to kind of pose some questions that will help us kind of like break it down a little bit further. When was the first time you heard the term trauma bonding?
Despite most people's ideas, it's not a chemical bond of ionic proportion. It's not two atoms coming together and forming an ionic bond. Like and it's also not a kink.
It's not, definitely not, definitely not. Taylor's here. Hello. It's good to see you. No, it definitely is not. So here's some formal definitions for you, because we love formal definitions. So according to Medical News Today, trauma bonding is a connection between an abusive person and the individual they abuse. It typically occurs when the abused person begins to develop sympathy or affection for the abuser.
So it's kind of like Stockholm syndrome almost.
I would say so, yeah. Oh, and P.S., I do want to preface, neither Ari or I are professionals when it comes to mental health, or we're not psychologists or anything like that. We're not therapists. However, we are two people who have experienced our own unique histories and varieties of trauma, and that's how we're going into this conversation. I just wanted to preface that.
Right.
Go ahead.
So just take this as individual experiences and take this as a cursory informational guide. If you need professional help, seek professional help from a licensed therapist or someone who knows the stronger, like more in-depth details in which be able to help you.
Exactly. But there's an additional layer to trauma bonding as well. According to Love to Pivot, trauma bonding is a type of attachment that can form between two people who have gone through a traumatic experience together as well, or at least have had similar histories or pasts when it comes to traumatic experiences. Honestly, I didn't hear this term until probably like a couple of years ago. Like,
Right.
it's pretty new to me. However, my understanding is that the term has existed for a while. But I heard the term in the context of that second explanation that I just provided, like forming an attachment between two people who have gone through a traumatic experience together.
Yeah, and I feel like it also kind of goes hand in hand with like a little bit of like codependent relationships.
Kind of, yeah.
Because speaking from my personal experience, I think that with my experiences with my first manic episode, and the stuff that happened with me in Seattle, that was like very hard on my mental health, and it was hard for the health and mental well-being for the people in my family and the people around me. I think specifically it was hard on my sister.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I came home, she kind of turned into, she took it upon herself to kind of become what she felt was a caregiver for me. And so for a while there, because I was so stunted from that, I almost fell into this sort of learned helplessness because of the institutionalization that I had gone through with jail and the mental hospital.
Yeah.
That there were certain things like just filling out basic paperwork or like asking to do things. It was sort of like she would just swoop in and do certain things. And so it's sort of like there was a certain amount of like resentment on her part that she felt like she had to take care of me. And so it would come out in these like explosive ways.
Mm-hmm.
Like it came out that she would do things every so often, like she would just yell at me for no reason, or she would do things that were abusive. Like she said she didn't like certain paintings of mine, so then later on she would break them. And she would do things like we had problems with boundaries, so she would like break doors, and she would do things like that. It was just because we just didn't have a very good relationship, because we had this codependent relationship that had formed like a bond. And so we just didn't know how to live together and work together, because we were trying to navigate our relationship after this very, very traumatic experience that we had been through. And so, you know, I said hurtful things, she said hurtful things. Um, but we were trying to navigate this relationship after, um mostly it was that I was scared of her, and that
Mhm.
I was scared of our relationship, and I didn't know how to deal with things afterwards. Um,
Interesting.
but you know, I tried, and you know, we all do things that we're not proud of when we've been through a trauma, you know.
Absolutely. And yeah, trauma impacts everyone differently. Like people may bond over them, but it could happen drastically differently. Let's see. Taylor says I had never heard the first definition, whereas RB had only heard the first definition. And then Taylor says this happens with many new parents after childbirth too. Interesting. So I would say that for me, um, trauma bonding first kind of manifested itself in my life when I was a teenager, because I think I've mentioned before that I had a very abusive grandmother, and I would have family members, especially nowadays, like we really very much connect over this shared trauma that we experienced, where we literally dealt with this person who had her own trauma, but she was weaponizing it against everyone else around her, right? And and sometimes I think part of our trauma bonding is that we like I'll use my cousin for example. We've kind of like joked about like being messed up because like of everything that we've gone through, but
Yeah.
that's really our way of kind of making it so we're able to process it in a way that's processable, that's not like intimidating or imposing in some way. Now, I would say the first major example of trauma bonding that I've been able to recognize as an adult has been with other gay men periodically, over whether it be a history of being bullied, emotional abuse, physical abuse. Like there was this one example of one situation, and content warning everyone, I'm going to be mentioning sexual assault here in a few minutes. But I was kind of dating this guy for a while, and this was like at a point not long after I had you know experienced sexual assault in the late 2000s. And this person, I knew that something was up, and because based on the behavior, and we ended up just like breaking down in front of one another and sharing our survival experiences. And it was a moment, like it was so difficult, it's so difficult for me to describe, because it was the first time I felt seen with regard to that type of experience, and I feel like that person felt the same way too. But like that's as far as we, like, obviously our relationship never panned out. Like that's as far as it went. Like we just, in that moment, we needed to bond and experience some sort of catharsis together over this traumatic thing that we had through, that
But
was very similar.
But imagine being friends with somebody and that's literally all you talk about and that's all you deal with is just getting in those cycles of this really horrible thing happened and it's always like
Yeah,
reliving that same thing over and over and over and over again. Because I have friends like that
I
who
do
all they
too.
want to talk about is just this one really terrible thing that happened and this one really terrible situation. And they just, it's sort of like they have this open wound and it's like they just keep want to keep like they have like a knife and they just want to keep like opening this wound, cutting themselves, opening this wound of just
Mhm.
like And it's like they're not healing the wound. They just want to keep like cutting the wound open and just like reliving. And sometimes they deal with that too. Like I do talk about my episodes. I do talk about the past and those things, but I talk about them to serve as an example because I have worked really hard to move past those things. Like my first episode doesn't affect me anymore. My second episode doesn't affect me anymore. These things, I put them in the past. Sometimes I do kind of feel bad about those things, and like I use them as examples of why, you know, why I struggle sometimes, but like they don't, they're so far in the past now that I don't let them affect me. But there's some people who just like they don't go to therapy. They don't talk about it
Yeah.
with anybody. They just it's like a record that plays in their head over and over and over again, and they just
Well, yeah.
don't do anything about it.
Sometimes people get so comfortable with their trauma. It could be because they've been conditioned to get used to it, right? Maybe it was in such a high frequency that they experienced that that's just their way of coping. But like some people get so familiar with it that, and I've seen people kind of romanticize trauma sometimes,
Mhm.
or go as far as using it as some form of, I don't know, like
A
some form
shield?
of weaponizing, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Like a shield or something. I
Sometimes, yeah.
I don't want to blame victims. I
Oh,
don't.
absolutely not. No.
I because my heart goes out to them, and I always will listen to somebody who has something to say about their trauma. Like I do want to listen to them, but the fact is that when every single time, that's literally the like when I ask how your day is, it's like every single time I ask you how your day is, it's like you tell me about this one really horrible thing. Like every conversation I've ever had with you always goes back to this one really horrible circumstance. It's like,
Right.
you know what I mean?
Well, and it's interesting, like, because I've also been that person before too. Especially when I was younger, I was most certainly that person because I was in a place where I don't think that I had like the thoughtfulness or like I didn't have the knowledge of how to.
But that was before therapy.
That was before therapy, right? But at the same time, like I do think when people get to a point where they can kind of like self-assess and understand that they had experienced trauma, like I do think it's important for people to get to a point to make a choice of like, okay, like where do I go from here? Like what do I do with this? Hold that thought. I gotta let Phoebe out of the office. Hello, Phoebe. Phoebe is making a guest appearance.
Hello, Phoebe.
Hi. What are you doing? I know you're being obnoxious. One moment. Come on. Go on.
Kitty bond. Kitty photo bond.
Oh.
Kitty photo bond.
It wouldn't be an episode without a cat meow.
Absolutely.
Speaking of cats, where's Larity? I'm used to Larity like yowling in the background.
Oh, he's sitting at my feet looking up at me. He's giving
Oh,
me big
okay.
googly eyes. He's like, hi.
It's almost time for food. 30 more minutes.
Kind of, yeah. I'm not judging people who tell me their stories over and over again. You
Right.
know, I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that it's part of the trauma bonding that,
Absolutely.
that the thing is that that's the only thing that connects us. That's the only thing that we share is this one traumatic event.
Well, and it's interesting because consider, like, let's think about two people who may have gone through something very similar. What if one person moves forward on a different timeline than the other, right? So,
Mhm.
like I think that that's something that is so difficult to navigate because it's like how do you then talk to that person, right?
Right.
How do you leave enough empathy aside to be like, okay, like this person is still struggling, right? It can be very challenging,
Right.
but then there are also people like you were mentioning who almost lose themselves in it to the extent that that's it's like a tunnel vision, if that makes sense, right?
Mhm.
You know, and that could also be part of the trauma too, unfortunately. And until a decision is made to address the trauma, like that there's got to be some sort of catalyst for improvement.
I mean, that's why I got to put out the books that I'm putting out this year. I'm going to write a book. I'm writing a book about the healing process that I've gone through. It's called Healings, and I'm also writing a book about. I wrote a poetry book that's 300 pages long about called Beachfront.
I'm excited about both. I'm excited about both. I think that's why, like, I've also written what I've written too, because, like, I mean, if for either of us, here's a question: have we trauma bonded? What do you think?
No, because we talk about so many different things.
We do, we do.
We talk about stuff. I think at the beginning of our show, we did tend to dwell on very negative topics, but I think that we have grown. I think that we don't just dwell in the negative. I think that we talk about a lot of very uplifting topics. I
Yeah,
think that we share joy and we share happiness, and that we also do share the sadness and the dark things. But I think that I don't I don't think that I've ever abused you. I don't think, and I don't think you ever
I don't.
abused me.
Yeah. Well, and I think you and I were very much. I think we're so self aware that, like, if that were to happen, we would both communicate. Like, we would both, because I don't think that would be something either of us would ever intend, right?
Right.
So, like, if something happens, we'd be like, you'd be like, Donnie, are you okay? What's going on? I'd be like, Ari, are you okay? What's going on? But yeah, like, I do, like, I think early in the show, like the first, what, season, I think we would kind of like lose ourselves in topics, especially if they were like heavier topics. Whereas now we're kind of at a point where, like, yeah, we can discuss trauma bonding, but we're not going to like lose ourselves
But
in it.
also, like, pee pee poo poo. Can we talk about it?
But also, I have a poop story.
I have a poop story too. You first.
So, oh my God, this one's really embarrassing. So, I got engaged 2 weekends ago, and I had a situation that same weekend.
Oh my God, no! You asked your fiance to marry you, and then you had the runs.
Ooh, like, I still kind of like, ooh, I still feel interesting when I hear the word fiance. Like, I'm not used to it, but I love it at the same time. Um, okay, so that Saturday of the proposal, as you can imagine, I partook in, you know, a wine tasting tour. So
You're walking around on this wine tasting tour.
well, like, this was the next, like, so the day prior, like, wine tasting. So, like, as one can imagine, slight intoxication happened. And because I'm in my mid 30s, my body does not handle that very well anymore.
No.
So the next day, we go to this gigantic breakfast, and I already was like not feeling good. I was just like my stomach was churning. I was lethargic. I was just like, I think I ate like maybe a fourth of my breakfast. So, like, Britt knew something was wrong. He was like, "Are you okay? You only ate a fourth of your breakfast." And I'm just like, I don't know if I'm going to die. Like, I don't know. So we had to go back up to the lighthouse where we did the proposal
Oh my God, here it
to
comes.
and to drop off a friend because she had left her car there. And that entire drive, I was driving that entire drive. I was white knuckling it,
Oh,
like, because like I felt everything in my body sink to the lowest reaches.
did you? Was it traumatic? Was that a trauma?
So we get to the lighthouse, and we drop off my friend, and I look at Britt, and I'm like, I need to go to the bathroom now. Like, so I'm like waddling. And I realized that the only options they have are porta johns.
You know what? Porta johns are viable.
At this point, I was grateful. I was
Was
grateful.
how full was the porta john though?
Oh, it was that it wasn't full. It wasn't full.
Okay, good.
But I proceeded to die for 30 minutes.
In a porta john. Oh my
And
god.
like the moment I opened that door, like I was just like
This is
like
happening.
it almost happened too quickly. But so like I'm funny segue to the story. Like I'm like sitting there like, doing the thing. And I hear a child enter the one next to me and I'm just like, but what was so funny is like this child had like this like 8-year-old kid had never used a porta john, so like his mom is out there like coaxing him and her like his cheerleader being like, do this, do that, you can do it, you can get through it. And I'm sitting there, I'm just like, yes, mom, like I'm needing your encouragement right now too, and you don't know it, but I'm here and I'm dying.
You're like, thanks, mom. I needed this.
And I leave. Like I waited for them to leave. I was like, I'm not getting out of here. So like I waited for them to leave, and I'm like limping back to the vehicle, and Britt's just like, "Are you okay?"
I swear to God, our pee pee poop poop stories are actually like our form of trauma bonding. It's like
We trauma
we're
bond
close
over
to 40,
shit.
our aging bodies don't know how to process food anymore. So like this is how we trauma bond, is that we give our war stories in the bathroom.
Okay, that's so true. You mentioned that you had a shitsident to talk
Oh my
about.
God. So not today. It was on Mother's Day. It was the worst. So I've been eating out a lot lately. And so I've been eating I haven't been necessarily eating vegan. I've been eating vegetarian, but my body doesn't know how to process food that's not vegan anymore. So like I can't process eggs, I can't process dairy. My body just doesn't know how to handle this food anymore. So I was at Chili's with my mom and my family. And
Chili.
I know Chili's. So I got the black bean fajitas. And I don't know about you, but if you've ever been to Chili's, their portion sizes are just like ginormous.
They are. Oh,
So
I've been to Chili's.
so I had filled up on chips and salsa before then, and the chips and salsa is fire, pie the way. And I was like, you know what else I'm gonna get? I'm gonna get myself major mistake. I got myself a Bud Light. So
What?
I was partaking of the alcohol. My mom was like, "Oh, do you want a drink?" And I was like, "Sure, I'll have a beer. Just whatever. Sitting with my family. My sister, people were having I think my stepdad got a drink too, and we were just there having drinks for. So I made a mistake and I got the large, and I was like, I'm not gonna finish this. So so first of all, bad mistake because beer makes you poop anyway. So I got the Bud Light, and then I got the veggie fajitas, and the black bean burger that they use for the veggie fajitas is made with egg. So I get about halfway through this veggie fajita, and I'm like, I'm not going to eat all of this. I'm so full. So I box everything up and I just put it away, and I'm just sitting there, and I'm like, this is fine. Like I feel fine. I'm like, I could go to the grocery store after this.
Oh no. Oh no.
I'm gonna go grocery shopping. So I go to the grocery store and I'm walking around the grocery store. I gotta go to the bathroom. And
Which grocery store? I need to know.
I went to Meijer. So I go to the bathroom and have you ever dumped a bucket full of water into the toilet? Nope. That was what my bowels did. And I'm like, oh, it must be over now. I must be okay now. It's all out of my system now. So I start walking around Meijer after the first time. And nope. So I go to the bathroom in Meijer, and it does it again. Bloop. And I have like the worst bowel shaking poop of my life. And it surely must be done now. So I'm walking around Meijer getting more groceries. And again, my body is like, no.
A third time?
Three times I pooped in Meijer.
I'm crying. Oh, whew.
trauma. This is your trauma bond poop story.
I feel healed, honestly. Now that we've bonded over this. Oh my goodness. Like, no, like I like been there.
I don't know how I made it through. I don't know how I made it through, but I did.
You got through it. You made it. You survived.
I did. I did. I did. Are we going to
So
actually talk about the topic today?
back to trauma bonding, everyone. So does it okay, so can an entire group of people or generation trauma bond over a shared experience?
Oh, absolutely. I feel like all of the millennials trauma bonded over 9/11. I feel like every year we see millennials cart out the footage of 9/11,
Yeah.
and it's like we have to see that every single year. Every single year it's like that. It just gets carted out. It's like we pull it out of the archive and we just have to see the videos of people committing suicide off 9/11, or just have to watch the video of the twin tower, or just like planes crashing. It's like it's a collective trauma bond experience, and it's always just like never forget, never forget. And it's like
Or it's the where were you when it happened question.
it's just like, can we just like move on?
Yeah. Like, I mean, don't get me wrong, like it's such a huge part of our history, right? But the fact that like an entire generation of people, like kids, we were teenagers or kids,
Mhm.
literally went to school and watched it happen live.
Well, honestly, if you get like the Gen Z who are younger, who weren't even born yet, and they have to get watch that stuff on TV and stuff. And so
Mhm.
their whole experience with the internet, with 9/11, is they're so disconnected from it. They never knew anything before that.
Yeah. Well, and you could also think about the pandemic, right? Like I feel like as a world, we all have trauma bonded over that.
Everybody knows at least one person who died from.
Absolutely. And we trauma bond over like, well, what were we doing? Like, how did we cope with it? How did we get through it? Right. I feel like right now we're in one of the biggest mental health crises ever
Right.
because we're still recovering from the pandemic, not just like physically, right? But also mentally, because like our whole world came to a standstill. And of course, many of us, most people had like some close exposure to death as a result.
I feel like Americans all trauma bond over mass shootings. That I feel like we're all like, we all have this like collective PTSD. Because if you ever hear like a car backfire in public,
Hmm.
people just like freak out. There's just
Oh,
like this weird trauma
absolutely.
bonded experience that everybody, like there's just like this cultural anxiety um, about mass shootings, and that there's just like this collective fear always that that is going to happen next somewhere, and that there's always a fear of going somewhere like a movie theater
Yeah.
or a festival or something, and that someone's just going to start mowing you down, or like going to a protest or something, and that somebody's going to hit you with a car, or there's always just like looking for a viable exit, or like that there's always just like this hyper vigilance and hyper awareness in places. And I feel like that's a trauma bonded experience, or like
Yeah.
a PTSD experience, that's like there's always like people are just always hyper aware and always hyper vigilant.
Yeah. I know, I completely agree. Arpy says, Donnie, would you say we trauma bonded over Chester Bennington's path? So, lead singer of Linkin Park, who took his life in 2017. I would say we bonded over that. Like a lot of my friends who are Linkin Park fans, like definitely bonded over that huge loss. No, like I do think that I do think that there is a sense of community in things that happen like that when we're able to come together and experience some sort of healing or catharsis, but that's something that after the fact we end up sharing forever, right?
I think the thing that makes it there's a difference between sharing and grief and trauma bonding. The thing with you can share grief with people and have a collective experience with people. The difference between shared grief and trauma bonding is that there's a connotation that trauma bonding is a toxic experience and that it's a very unhealthy dynamic,
True.
and that it's not a good thing. Like when you get with these people, or when you share in this trauma and that you're having this unhealthy dynamic, it's not just sharing grief, it's not just doing these things, it's this unhealthy relationship dynamic.
Yeah, yeah. So, like, I guess, well, and the thing is, like, I think as millennials, and I know some Gen Zers do this too, we kind of like joke about trauma bonding. Like, we're like, whoa, we went through this whole thing together. Like, let's reflect on it, right? Like, let's relate to one another through this horrible thing.
But that's what I'm saying. That's why I was saying, like, some people,
Hmm.
that's all they talk about is that one experience. And that's why I'm saying, like, sometimes it gets to be like to toxic levels where it's like, that's all they talk about. And that's the only thing that they care about. And that's the only thing that they think about is just like, it gets, there's no other relationship dynamic than this one experience. And it's very one dimension, like, it's a very one dimensional relationship. And like, that's all they talk about and all they think about. And it's very like, it just is this one thing. Like it's like it's almost like they have nothing else in their life than this one
Hmm.
experience. Like that's our whole relationship is just this one moment in time, and there's nothing else beyond that.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Um, can relationships built on experiential attachment, um, like based on that trauma bonding, can they survive? Do you think?
I think it's possible. I think that I think it's possible, but I think that there can be growth from those experiences.
Yeah.
Um, I think that I think takes a lot, like I said, like you said, a lot of self reflection. I think that that therapy and that doing the self work on someone's
Yeah.
part will help them get to those levels of where they need to move beyond it. It does take healing.
Mhm.
I think that getting that healing that they need to move beyond those one dimensional experiences, because they do have that unhealed part of themselves, and that they just haven't moved on from those things. um, I think that, yeah, I think that gaining more experiences in their life will help them.
Yeah. I think also surrounding yourself with good people, like well-meaning people, can sometimes help with it, so long as it's not pinned on them to be responsible to help a person out of their, cycles, right?
Oh, so when we were writing the questions, I was just looking at the next question. I was talking about the movie Mommy Dearest, because they had such this unhealthy relationship dynamic, in that the mother would physically and emotionally abuse her daughter. She was this Hollywood actress, and she would do things like she would take the coat hanger and be like, "No more wire coat hangers," and she would literally physically beat her daughter, and she would emotionally abuse her and stuff. And so she would do things like that. And there was a certain amount of like minimization about
Yeah.
the abuse that she did to her. And it was because, like, well, she was abused, and she was a Hollywood actress, and there was just a lot of pressure on her. And it was sort of like kind of like trying to explain away why she was the way she was, sort of thing. And it was sort of like, yeah, she was a bad person, but it was also that she was the product of a system. And it was sort of like, in the end, her daughter did kind of, um, escape the abusive situation of her mother. But it was sort of like, um, that trauma bond with her mother
Yeah.
But it was sort of like that, you know, it almost made it seem like the daughter was, from the perspective of the mother, that the daughter was kind of like the bad person for not having stuck with her almost.
Well, and so like if you have trauma bonded with an abusive narcissist, right? Like they have a way of kind of twisting it and making it out to be like the victim's fault all the time, right? That's
Mhm.
why those cruel cycles end up happening, and I think that that is a film wise a good example that you noted, right?
Yeah.
um and it always comes back down to minimization though. And unfortunately, like if we are exposed to like some sort of like trauma, like in the media for example, right? Like a lot of times, like the person who is the recipient of that trauma often gets painted as the villain, right? Because maybe they didn't know how to handle the trauma, or like for me, like, oh, you didn't stand up for yourself, you didn't do anything when it happened, what kind of a thing. Like that's so disturbing when you think about it.
Yeah.
Like that blame. Hmm. So do we blame ourselves for the abuse when they make up for it with gifts and affection?
That's part of that cycle, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's part of the narcissistic cycle, is that they're doing those things as a way. I think if you're not aware of the cycle, there is a certain amount of, if they are nice to you or if they're kind to you, it's sort of like there's a certain amount of like gaslighting ourselves of like, well, they must not be an entirely bad person because they do these nice things for me and they're nice to me sometimes. So they can't be all bad all the time, right?
Yeah.
And so like you think and so like when there are no consequences for the bad things that they've done, you think, oh,
Yeah. It becomes it becomes normalized, right?
right,
So like when you see that it's become normalized, then you find ways to justify it no matter how horrible it could be, right?
right.
So, oh. Um, is there a fine line between forgiveness and minimization?
I think there is. I think it's very difficult to and I was thinking about this with all of my exes and my ex who I don't know if he's forgiven me or what. But you think about it, you think about that fine line of that forgiveness versus minimization, and I walk that line quite frequently in my mind, where I try to forgive them, but then at certain times I minimize it in my mind, that maybe it was just all in my head about certain things that happened, that
Yeah.
maybe it wasn't as bad as I thought it was, or maybe I'm actually the bad person and that it, you know, or that certain things didn't happen the way that I'm remembering, or you know, um, maybe the lead up to certain things was not as bad as it was, and that so it's sort of like it's so hard to it's so hard to think about the cause and effect of situations, and so
Yeah.
it there's a lot of self blame involved when
Yeah.
you're somebody who's been abused or been through an abusive situation. It's so hard to walk that fine line. Um,
Absolutely.
so it's very difficult to know the difference. Um, it's a very very fine line. Um, I often will revisit these things in my mind. I try not to dwell on them too much and let them overtake my life, but um, I do often think about them from time to time as a way to check myself as juxtaposed to how I am now. Uh,
Hmm.
like because I looked I when I would look at my old videos, that's why I private my old videos, is because I thought I was a bad person back then. That I was just like this horrible person that was just so mean and cruel, and that I had evolved into a kind person. But then I looked at my old videos and I was like, actually, I've always been a kind person, and that I'm actually, I want to cry about that, because you think about those things and you just think that like that, you just don't think about, yeah, just think that like I just minimize so many things about myself and other people, and just, you know, it's just, you think about the way that things are, and you have this lens about how things were, and it changes as you go through time, and it's not always your view of yourself and others is not always accurate, and so it's always good to just revisit those things.
Yeah. Well, I think it was very brave of you to discuss that. And as a person who's known you for 15 years, I can honestly say that you were one of the most kind people ever. And I think that you have just continued to grow as a person, and you've become more self-aware as a person, right? Because during those times, like back in the day, like you were experiencing things at that time that you didn't have knowledge about or could articulate or explain, right? And I think like I think we're kind of conditioned to just feel like this constant shame where we minimize ourselves. We're told to not make a big deal out of everything. Like that's a big thing, right? Which is probably why like you say those things to yourself too, where you're like, well, like maybe it wasn't that big of a thing, or maybe I'm blowing it out of proportion kind of a thing, right? Because I have similar thought processes too. But I
Yeah,
remember
I was
that
thinking that was going for you too, that you tend to minimize things that happen with like your grandmother and with like the bullying in high school and all
absolutely.
of that stuff, is that like, and like that's why I was so proud of you when you came out and did those videos about bullying, is because it was sort
Yeah.
of like you finally stood up for yourself and that you didn't let things go.
Well, and likewise, like I'm proud of you too for being able to be so vulnerable and open about your mental health experiences, to write a book, like multiple books about them, prose and poetry, like that takes a lot of strength to do. And I think if there's one way that we can improve this world, especially when it comes to mental health, it's sharing our experiences, right? Because there's still so much stigma, right? Like people don't realize it, but there's a lot of stigma. So,
Yeah, I know. People were tweeting at me today, popcorn emojis, about my story.
goodness. Well, what do you have any parting words for the evening?
um, should we always carry diapers on you, because as you get older, you're just gonna poop everywhere, and find a friend that you can trauma bond about pooping with.
Before you travel, always know where the nearest bathroom is.
I swear to God, there needs to be an app about the nearest bathroom. Somebody make this app. I need to call it pee pee poop poop near you, or poo. Just if you want to shorten it, just be poo near you.
PNY. That can be like the acronym.
Poo near you, and just have it be like a poop emoji with like a little like little drop, like a on
On a
an
map,
arrow,
like a
a map arrow, and just I just need that to happen. I just need a poop emoji. Just give me that app so I
you
know
know
where the
what?
nearest bathroom is when I need to drop a deuce.
If if we were more technically able, we should totally invent the poop app.
Hey, I will spend money to invest in this app. Just make this happen.
Absolutely. Oh my goodness.
I'll be an angel investor for that app.
Well, my friends, thank you so much for tuning in for another episode of Restitching the Tapestry. And we hope that you have a good rest of your week, and we will see you again next week. We love you. I'm not even going to try it because I'm going to mess up specialized heart. I can't do it. Anyway, love you all. Bye.